Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Baranek, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Miami Jewish Film Festival's virtual speaker series. We're thrilled to have director Kacey Cox and producer Cindy Drukier Jan Jekielek with us today, who will be talking about her poignant film, Finding Manny. Before we begin, I want you to know that you will have a chance to ask us any questions you may have, but after our discussion. If you do have a question, we would like you to please find the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer it once we open questions to the audience. So it is really my pleasure to be here today and monitor this discussion. I am in Miami Beach. Why don't we all tell each other where we are located through this Zoom? And we'll start with our film director, Kacey. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kacey, and I am calling.
Uh-oh. Okay, Kacey's, you're freezing a little bit. Hopefully you'll come back.
Okay. All right.
And we'll go to Jan and Cindy.
Go ahead.
Well, we happen to be in Hartford, Connecticut right now in the US. We've been at an event, a really kind of wonderful event here. And now we are taking advantage of a great day. By the way, I just wanted to say it's the perfect day to be holding this because it's my birthday. And what better thing could we have on my birthday than a Q&A about Finding Manny and, Cindy's father and Cindy here. So.
You know what, Jan? We were going to have a cake at the end, but you blew it for us. You blew the surprise.
Yeah.
So it's great to see you. Kacey, are you back with us? Let's give you another chance.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? Things are working right now?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Calling here from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
There you go. And full disclosure, and as I told Cindy and Jan, I am originally from Toronto myself. I was born in Toronto. I went to high school there and undergraduate work there. And my parents and my family are all still in Toronto, but I made the trip down to Miami Beach and I never left. So on that note, I'm really pleased to be here with all of you, and I'd like to jump right into it. And we're assuming that everyone that's with us today has seen the film. And as Cindy said a few minutes ago before we started, we did find Manny. So we hope we don't ruin the ending for you, but hopefully you all have seen the film. So I'll start with you, Cindy. How did it come about that, I know a book was published back in the 90s, but who found that online story that really triggered all of this happening?
Well, like you saw in the film, my brother found it. He sent the link to my mom and then sent it to everyone else. He didn't actually even read the article yet at the time. He just saw the headline and went, hey, isn't that where, Dad was at the end of the war? And, unlike many documentaries, you're there for the very beginning. So exactly what you saw in the documentary is how it happened. Dad's pictures in it. The article has, talks about it. The main person interviewed is Erwin Farkas, who was my dad's buddy. And then my mom did some Googling, found his phone number after, there was enough identifying information that she could find him. And my dad called him up, caught up on the last 70 years. And he's like, get in touch with, Anna Andlauer. And then can't remember who called who, how it happened. And then she got in touch, and Kacey was there. We'll explain how it happened, why Kacey was there, and we were filming all of this, but he was there for that first call with Anna where she invited my dad to come to Germany. And that's literally how there was never a plan to make a documentary, never a plan to go to Germany and Poland. Everything just kind of started unfolding in front of us.
Yeah, so it was a very natural procession. But Kacey, how did you get involved in all this, and how do you know the family? Tie it all together for us.
Sure, I'll try my best. And let me know if there's any technical issues. I'll move closer to the internet connection. So Jan and I had been acquaintances for some time. And I remember getting a phone call. I was traveling abroad and I got a phone call from Cindy, which was unusual because, I don't think we've ever, had a sort of direct phone call, but I picked up the call and I said hello, and she said that she's going to be visiting Toronto in the following week, and she knew that I was a filmmaker, and basically asked me for
Oh, Kacey, we lost
No.
you. Maybe
Kacey, you got frozen again. Maybe
Oh,
you'll
wait.
change okay, go ahead, Kacey.
Okay. Wait, oh, it looks like it's a bit unstable here. Hold on. Maybe I should go closer to the connection. You guys want to bear with me a quick moment here? I'll be right back.
I'll
go
fill in
closer to
one
the-
Okay.
gap while you do that in the
Good,
story.
you go ahead, Kacey, come on back, and
Yeah.
we're live, so we're going. We
Okay.
make this happen.
Let's make
Exactly.
it
Go
happen.
ahead, Cindy.
So the
Go
gap
ahead.
to fill in is, once my dad made that phone call to Erin Farkas, he told us that he had this cigar box of photos from the time that is the opening scene of the film. And literally, we had seen some photos, but there was obviously something more here. So because I was about to go to Toronto, it was Passover, and Lori and her son was like, hey, don't open it yet. Wait till we go there, because it was very rare that he would talk about the war. So I knew if he started looking at these photos, there'd be, stories coming out, and I wanted to capture it. And so I thought, okay, I can capture it on my cell phone. And I thought of Kacey, and I'm like, well, maybe someone with a better camera can come over and just capture it for the family. That was my thinking. There is zero thought that it would be anything more than that. I just wanted, to capture the moment of my dad opening the box, sharing the pictures, and sharing some stories.
So Jan, how do you know Kacey?
Well, so, the film is basically in Canada, it's licensed through NTD Canada. And so, I've both Kacey and I have worked with NTD Canada on a number of projects. And actually, Kacey did a really wonderful documentary called The Crown. It's a very short film about Miss World Canada, Anastasia Lin, who wins this Miss World Canada competition on a human rights in China platform. And then it turns out that the finale is in China, right? And she gets blocked, of course, from going there because the Chinese regime doesn't like talking about such things. So he kind of did this fly on the wall thing where he just accompanied her on her mission to try to get to this thing, and he did a beautiful job with this short documentary. And so as this evolved, you'll kind of, I guess you'll lean how this kind of evolved. But basically we invited another kind of like another cameraman over with Kacey for this opening. We didn't know we were making a film at this time, but what we wanted to do was immortalize this moment of, one, seeing these photos that hadn't been seen in decades, and two, to actually basically have something that could be passed on to the next generation, right? And what that would be was Manny reminiscing. That was our idea, right? Yeah.
Wonderful, and that came across very clearly in the film. And so, Kacey, you're back with us. Welcome. Let's hear you. Hopefully, Kacey.
All right. How's this?
Go.
How's this? I'm in my messy living room. My kids are gone.
Still not perfect, but because you're still freezing a little bit.
Yeah, we are. Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay, how's this now? I seem to have an okay connection.
Yeah, your voice is good. But it's all good. Go ahead. We want to hear you speak.
Great. Yeah, I'll just pick up where Cindy left off. I had got a phone call from Cindy. Like she said, she had her dad Manny was going to be opening this cigar box that he had never shown the family to this point. She knew that I had some filmmaking skills and I had a camera, so she had asked the favor, and I said, why not?
Wonderful. Jan, we want to know about you. How did you and Cindy meet, and how long have you been part of? Well, come on, everyone wants to know it. I'm brave enough to ask it. How did you all meet? And there you go. Good. That's good. Go ahead.
No, it's actually it's actually connected to this story. So Cindy and I, we had work running international youth programs for the Canadians out there through a nonprofit called Canada World Youth. We would assemble these teams of young people. Cindy was running a Bali Sunshine Coast, which are both beautiful places exchange. I was running a Slave Lake, Alberta, which is like northern Alberta to Poland in the winter exchange, which was kind of the less desirable of the exchanges, right? She had given me her father's book, the one you mentioned earlier. I don't know if it was on camera or not, but Manny wrote a memoir in the early 90s about, you know, some of the things that you see in the film. And so Cindy gave me this book. She told me, this is the book I've waited my whole life to read, right? I read this book and the book was fantastic to me. I'll actually recommend it. The book is called Carved in Stone, okay? A Boy's Tale, The War Years. You can look it up on Amazon. It's on Kindle and so forth. I don't know if there's any print versions left, but basically the book was one chapter, The War Years, so some of the stuff you saw, and the other chapter was watching Poland open up after 1989, after the Berlin Wall fell. And this book, and he wrote so dispassionately and honestly that it captured my heart. And I thought, this is incredible. And I invited Cindy. I called her in Bali and I said, Cindy, you have to come to Poland. I'm going to be your guide. I'm a fluent Polish speaker, as you may have gleaned from the film, and I'll be your guide. We'll use your dad's book and we'll just kind of travel through Poland, through all these places that are in the book. And in the process, we were kind of, you know, looking at each other and we're like, this kind of seems to be working pretty well.
My
right?
joke is that he used me to get to my father.
But it worked. You see, it worked.
It worked.
So Jan, let me see. Bali or Poland in the winter? Yes, good call, Cindy, on your part. You know, the book, I happen to read about the book, and you know, it's interesting. Cindy, can you share why the book was titled what it was for a second?
Sure. So Carved in Stone, it actually comes from a quote from Primo Levi. And he said that there was two kinds of Holocaust survivors, those who repress it all and those for whom it's as if carved in stone. So obviously, you know which camp my father puts himself in. And he had just committed suicide, Primo Levi. And that was that was one of the so what happened was in 1991, my parents went to Poland spent a few months in Poland, and he had just, he had a very successful furniture manufacturing company for 26 years in Canada. And that just went south between free trade and the goods and service tax that had just come into Canada. Wood manufacturing is one of the sacrificed industries, so that wasn't going well. And anyway, and then, Primo Levi had committed suicide. Just a confluence of things made him decide to go confront his demons, to go back to Poland for the first time since the war. And so he went all the places, but only in Poland. He did not go to Germany. So at that time, Warsaw was their base, but they went to the different places, and he, remembered and wrote his memoirs. And as Jan says, one chapter is the war years, one chapter is present day Poland, and what him and my mom were experiencing and they're exploring, and a lot of very, very interesting stories in that as well. People they met and understanding what the Jewish community was and wasn't, a modern day Poland. So yeah, that's where the title of the book and the impetus for why he wrote it. And up until that point, it comes clear in the film that we hadn't heard, much of his stories. He didn't talk about it very much. So, when Jan says that was the book I was waiting to read my whole life, it's like that, everybody else, of course I read a transcript before or whatever, but everyone in the world could, learn about it at the same time, that us kids did.
Cindy, your two sisters and your brother all sort of shared the same thought in the film. And by saying that when you were kids, your dad really didn't talk about his experiences, and you knew he was a survivor. When did you finally begin hearing the stories? What do you think the impetus was? It the book that you mentioned that allowed him to begin sharing his stories of survival?
Yeah, it was basically that. Growing up, we had heard little tidbits, and if he was in a particular mood, he would share something. And we didn't feel like, as Wendy kind of mentioned, that we could ask more. Like it was just, whatever was given. We didn't realize, it was interesting. One of the things we realized when we were on the trip and sharing with each other is we didn't all necessarily know the same things. And we didn't realize we didn't know the same things. I guess we didn't even talk about it. Like my dad had told my brother, maybe because he was the eldest or the boy, I don't know, but like bedtime stories, and so he learned some of the stories. We're like, what, really? You heard that? I had no idea. So it was tidbits. There was nothing, I mean, I knew he had, you know, the train story more or less at the end, knew he had been in book involved, really, but not a lot of details. And, you know, I didn't know that my grandmother, his mother, did we know she had been in Auschwitz? I didn't know she had a tattoo my whole life. She always wore long sleeves. She certainly, and her and my aunt never ever talked about anything. And they thought, my aunt thought, she's passed now, but at the time she thought it was absolutely crazy that he was going to Poland in 91. She didn't want to hear about it. It was crazy. Why would you do that? So she was definitely in the other camp from.
It's so true. It's so true what you're saying, Cindy, because Poland in 1991 was just coming out of the communist, you know, government era. And it was, you know, listen, I went as late as 2019. So I've been there, you know, 21 times since 1992 to 2021. So I've seen, you know, that evolving, and it's very true. Poland in the late 80s, early 90s was a very different country than it is today. So I can understand that sort of doubting. Kacey's back with us. Kacey, yes, we're good. Kacey, okay. Tell me, what was the most eye-opening aspect of your experience filming in Europe? What did you find most interesting?
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, you know, prior to traveling to Europe with the family, we drove through Poland and then across Germany. You know.
No.
Can you hear me? No.
Oh.
We'll give it another shot. Go ahead, Kacey.
Prior to that,
Kacey, why don't you give us a call? We can at least put you on speakerphone and look at your face.
Okay. Let's.
I'll call you right now. I'll call you right
okay.
now.
Okay. Sure.
All right. Okay.
Like whenever you get to the good stuff, it freezes.
Oh, interesting.
I know.
Okay. Well,
I know. All right, Kacey. We'll see you in a few minutes. Cindy,
okay.
I'm back with you. Kacey, are you okay? Kacey's muted for a sec.
Yeah, I'm
Kacey,
still here.
Are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Here.
So tell us. Go ahead. What you were saying.
Okay. Go ahead, Kacey. Okay. Yeah.
Just rest it.
Yeah. Does this sound okay? Go ahead.
Yeah. Is it echoing or is it okay there?
It's fine.
It's okay.
Okay. So where were we? We were talking about you know, what was interesting that I experienced over there. Yeah, prior to going on that trip, you know, across Poland and through Germany, you know, the extent of my knowledge of the Holocaust was, you know, through books that I you know, maybe read in grade school, Diary of Anne Frank, you know, Hollywood iterations of the Holocaust, you know, different movies. So, you know, it was kind of more like a theoretical kind of thing for me. Going there and going through, you know, well, essentially retracing, you know, Manny's steps through the Holocaust, you know, stopping at the different labor camps, you know, just hearing him recount, you know, that experience firsthand. Yeah, I mean, it was a whole new, it just made the whole thing much more tangible for me. So it was no longer like, obviously I never experienced it myself or any of my family members, but it became more of a tangible thing for you know, that I can kind of touch and feel. And I mean, there were many parts of the trip that were very heavy. Of course, you know, I recall when we went to Auschwitz that day, it was just a very heavy feeling. You know, that's something that I'll always carry with me. And there are also moments of, you know, moments of levity with the family, and Manny is a very inspirational person. And so the trip was both, you know, at times very heavy and somber, and at other times very lighthearted and inspiring. So it was quite a unique type of experience.
Wonderful. And Kacey, I want to tell you, as a film watcher, not a professional, I thought the film flowed very, very, it flowed beautifully throughout. I thought the, you know, the filming in Lodz, in the memorial there, was especially, it was so clear. It was as if those of us watching the film were right there with you. And the scenes there, you know, back in Germany at the former orphanage and so on. So in Hebrew we say Yasher Koach. Nice job. You did a great job, Kacey, as a director. So there you go. You deserve a smile. Cindy, I'm coming back to you. Ready? And I told you I was going to ask this question. You know, the film showed the 4 kids, the 3 daughters and the son. You know, not much about your 2 sisters. A little bit. You know, there were a few scenes with your sisters. There was one person that they focused on quite a bit of the 3rd generation, as we say, or as we say, 3G, and that was the grandson. Who is that your son? Who is that young man that they kept showing?
Brett, that's my sister Lori's son. So.
And how old is he today?
He just had his 18th birthday.
Yeah, he was a great character in the film because he brought a different perspective. I thought the comments that he made, I thought the questions that he asked were really terrific as well. So I told you, Cindy, I was going to ask this. One of the things that stood out as I was watching the film was that you come from seems a secular Jewish family, and your brother obviously is not a secular Jewish person anymore. He wearing a kippah and wearing the black and so on and so forth. When did that transformation happen, and how did that play out with the relationship with your parents and with your siblings and you?
So yeah, we grew up conservative. You know, we went to shul for the high holidays, and you know, that was about it. I went to Hebrew school. We all went to Hebrew school as kids. That was, you know, how we grew up. No one was particularly religious. When he was doing his PhD in astrophysics at UBC in Vancouver, he went to Vancouver, you know, didn't know anyone, didn't have a community, and he ended up meeting, I can't remember where, like at the grocery or something. I can't remember the exact story, but he ended up meeting the Lubavitch rabbi there, and they, you know, struck up a conversation, a relationship. He started to go, and he became Lubavitch. So, and there, you know, it's funny. I don't know if you know the joke, but I can't remember how many Jews there are in Vancouver, but there's a joke that, you know, there's X number of Jews in Vancouver and each one thinks they're the only one, because there's actually not that strong of a Jewish community there, like say compared to Toronto or New York or Montreal or New York. So, but yeah, so he became, you know, he became very religious. And then he finished his PhD. He ended up I guess he went to Cambridge after. That's where he ended up getting married. His wife's British, and then they were at University of Indiana. Anyway, so how do the rest of us? Well, it was, you know, unusual. I mean, it was, you know, unexpected. As you say, most people in the family are more secular. So there was, you know, I think when he would first become religious, he was probably more zealous, hoped maybe he could, you know, the rest of us would come along. That didn't happen. I remember my mom being like, you know what, just calm that down a bit if you want to. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there's different adjustments to make just in terms of like, you know, keeping kosher and this and that, of, you know, visiting or coming to visit my parents. So there's all that too. But I would say, you know, maybe a few issues at the beginning ironed out, but everyone, you know, everyone's good with each other. We're close, but that trip was really remarkable because we realized it was the first time that all of us had been, like, aside from a weekend or something for someone's wedding, it was the first time since 1982 we had all traveled together.
That's the part that I find, you know, listen, being part of a family as well is that part, and just the socializing aspect, the opportunity to interact with siblings and brothers-in-law and nephews and whatever it was. Jan, where are you from originally? Your family in Poland, and what was it like to go back to Poland with your in-laws and wife and sisters-in-laws and brothers-in-law and all of them? How was that for you?
Well, okay, so a couple of things. So you pronounced my name very well, by the way. I might say most people can't. It's a rare Polish name. Most people misspell it, even in Poland. Okay. And all the Jekieleks come from a small area very, very close to where they built the Auschwitz concentration camp. So it's very interesting. I remember I went there I've been to Auschwitz 7 times. I went there once to organize, we had discovered that this, forced organ harvesting that the Chinese regime is basically perpetrating, the murder for organs business, was real. I had been convinced of this. And in Israel, they had signed a petition of about 10,000 people who said, expose this crime at Auschwitz. Basically, this was the petition. So they gave it to me, say, you speak Polish, go to Auschwitz and set this up, just to have some kind of press conference. So I went there. I go to the director of education at Auschwitz. I shake his hand and I say, Jan Jekielek. And he's like, oh, what a familiar last name you have. And this was a Twilight Zone moment for me, because no one's ever said that, right? It's everybody, but it's basically from that region. So it's very, the connections are kind of very interesting. And there were actually on both sides of my family. They were on one side of my family who were very all involved in vaccine development and so forth. So there was a kind of a smuggling operation into some of the camps, including Auschwitz, to help, some people survive. And there was also on the other side of the Jekielek family, there were these, kind of home army people that were in the region that were battling the Nazis. So there's just a lot of interesting connections. For me, I love being in this role where I can, be with people and help facilitate, experiences, I guess, and I guess I'm a bit of a listener. I love listening. I love learning new things. And so for me, much as for Kacey, of course, I maybe knew a lot more than Kacey at this point about the realities of the Holocaust and so forth. But for example, and this comes out in the film a little bit, having studied all this for so long, I still had no real sense of how important the slave labor aspect was to the Nazi war effort. That was something, frankly, all of us really weren't aware of, right? It's very interesting. Because, for example, in Manny's case, right, he was in these different camps, in Buchenwald. We learned that he had actually been in something they call the small camp, which was like the worst part of the Buchenwald camp. He didn't even realize he was in a sub camp within the camp, because, how would you know? You're just in there, right? And then of course he was making these Panzerfaust, these bazooka, one used bazookas and so forth. He didn't realize that this was, kind of a really important thing. And they were working them to death basically by making actual functioning war art machinery, right?
Great. So I have 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. And if you do we have a number of people with us today. If you have a question, you can go on the bottom of the screen. There's a Q&A. And you can press the Q&A button there if you have a question. So that'll be in just a minute or so. 2 quick questions. How did your dad get to Toronto? Why did he pick Toronto? How did he arrive in Toronto?
So at the end of the war, he was in that orphanage in Cluster Indersdorf. And actually before that, this part wasn't able to be included in the film, but from, jumping the train, finding some farmers, it helped him. And then the war ended. And him and his friend, Izzy, they started just walking back to Poland to see if anyone survived. They didn't know what to do. Ended up hooking up with an American army unit. And my dad was like, they took him on as the translator, because he spoke a spattering of, German and Czech and, everything else. And there was a Jewish sergeant in that unit that kind of took it on himself to help sponsor him, like help, arrange for him to get to America. So when he got to Cluster Indersdorf, remember he said he heard, they were helping arrange passage kind of thing. So I can't remember how long he was there. It was there, and then they moved him to another place, but 6 months or something. I can't remember exactly how long. Basically ended up, there's some cousins in New York, and were able to, make a connection. So he got to New York, and in the meantime, he had learned shortly before going over that his mother and sister had survived. He went in, this Cluster Indersdorf was near Munich. He went into Munich, just to see the city while he was at Cluster Indersdorf, and bumped into some people he knew from before the war, and had seen his sister or mother or both, I can't remember. And they were in Sweden. they had made it there by the end of the war. They were in Mauthausen or some camp, and then at the end of the war so he found out they were alive. Still no contact, but found out they were alive. And his mother, his mother had a sister who had gone to Canada, to Toronto, before the war. So his mother and sister ended up in Toronto. And when he got to New York, he took a train and visited them in Toronto. And it just, as it turned out, it was just immigration wise easier for him to go to Canada than to bring them to the US. So he went to join them in Canada. He spent about a year in New York.
Good. Yeah. Cindy and Kacey, I'm going to come back to you in just a few minutes. Again, everyone that's here, please, if you have a question, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A, and I will bring it to our panelists. But Cindy, the question that everybody wants to know, because as we watch the film, it was filmed a few years ago, obviously, and your dad celebrated his 90th birthday on camera. And by the way, there was a scene at a cottage.
Uh-huh.
Where was that? In Muskoka? Because only because I'm a Canadian do I know that.
Right, cottage country. That's my sister's place. It's in Quebec. So,
it looks beautiful. It looks very serene.
Do you know Gatineau?
I don't. I'm a Muskoka guy. I used to go up 400 on the weekend. But the big question, of course, that everybody wants to know, and I am with 33 people watching, is how are your parents? How are they feeling? Give us an update on your mom and dad, please.
Well, my dad just celebrated his 93rd birthday. Not so well. He's got Alzheimer's now, and it doesn't get better. My sister said at the end of the film, if we hadn't done it now, we would never have. It really, really was the last possible chance. We even almost delayed it by some months at one point, because anyway, and I'm very grateful that we didn't. And I had, kind of the feeling we need to do it now. They're delaying is not a good idea. And he, things, if anyone has experience with Alzheimer's, you know how it goes. It just, slowly then just declines. So they're in Toronto. COVID has been hard because, we haven't been able to easily visit. It's just been in the last couple months, actually, that we've been able to really spend time there. So yeah, it's hard.
I appreciate that, and I have to tell you, the film was obviously impacting. I've seen the different film festivals and the number of people that have had the opportunity to watch the film and learn about your dad's story. In fact, we have someone, Margaret is watching with us, and has asked if, let's say, you as a filmmaker with Kacey, if you would have any other book recommendations that you would recommend, that someone who may have seen the film or read your dad's book, something along those lines that you might recommend as well.
A book that my dad gave to me, and I read it. It's called Moments of Reprieve, and it's Stuart. What's his name? I can see it. Semper. Anyway, it's not coming to me. Maybe we can look it up. And I don't know. Well, okay. There's two books. That one is about moments of reprieve in Auschwitz. There was an orchestra and a cultural club and a discussion group, and it's just kind of a different take on things. And I don't know why. What really touched me about it is that my father, why it was an important book he gave to me to read. And so I, as I was reading it, which is not your normal Holocaust book either, because it's kind of those moments of reprieve, right, when things that the exception to the rule. But maybe that was, obviously he's a very optimistic, positive guy. And
Moments of Reprieve is also by Primo Levi.
Oh, it's by Primo Levi. So, and then there's another book called what's it called? It'll come to me, but it basically, the theme is nothing else could be written. except the story of the Holocaust. So for my dad, he was always very literary inclined, surrounded himself with writers, a voracious reader. You know, he thinks if he, you know, hadn't been denied education, he probably would have been a history professor or something. He was like, you know, a devourer of books. And his memoir was he couldn't write anything else until he wrote that. Like that had to be, nothing else would be meaningful to write. And he's written a few things since, a fiction book, and this, it'll come to me, the other book that I read that,
And
Or you have a
But
few
he
minutes
also
to think
gave-
about it.
Yeah.
Mark, in case
Let me
there's anyone out there among the 34 plus us that haven't read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl,
yes,
I think you have to read that. It's a very quick read, and it's, you know, one of the most
Yeah,
powerful books you
agree.
could read in the vein of Manny's approach to life. Okay?
Literature or
Yeah.
Life is the other one.
Mhm.
That's the other one. Literature
Okay.
or Life.
All right, Jan, this question is for you. Jan from Donna. Donna asked, where were you born and when did you move to Canada?
So I came over in the womb. My parents escaped from communist Poland in the early 70s. Okay, and basically they went through France. It's kind of there's a whole kind of interesting story about how they got out, because my mother had declined to join the Communist Party of Poland, which is kind of one of these offers you can't refuse, if you understand. But because our families had been persecuted by the communists, you couldn't do it. She had to escape. They ended up in Canada. I was already kind of on the way. And I, you know, basically 1973, on this day, as we speak, I came out and I learned Polish as a first language. That's why I got to be kind of native speaker in Polish, in addition to speaking English, which has kind of been wonderful for us, for this film, of course, and all sorts of other great reasons.
Wonderful. Kacey, I'm gonna throw this one to you if you know the answer. Sonia commented and said she found the name of the film a little bit confusing. She thought it was going to be about Manny possibly finding a friend, maybe in the orphanage, but in the end it turned out that Manny was a protagonist. Did you have any say, Kacey, in the film title, and tell us about that?
Sure. Coming up with a title that everyone on the team is happy with, you know, in any endeavor is always never going to be a straight line. Initially, we were planning to possibly call the film, name the film after the book Carved in Stone, A Boy's Tale. And so, you know, in the early iterations of editing, that was kind of that was where we were shaping the film towards, and that was the title we had in mind. Maybe about midway through, we decided to just do a brainstorm, and there could have been other factors that we considered, having a name that had a nice ring to it, or marketing considerations. But I couldn't tell you exactly what how that name came up. But
I think your kids were watching Finding Nemo. Just kidding.
Really? Yes.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't it. No. Yeah.
Thank you, Kacey. Thank you so much. Jan, one more question for you. Ready? How did you end up working at the Epoch Times? What did you do before then? And what is your educational background?
Okay. All right. Well, let's do
Jan's life story.
Well, no. So it's relevant. Okay, it's relevant. So my educational background, perhaps less relevant. I was an evolutionary biologist. I was training to be an evolutionary biologist, and then life happened and took a different turn. And I ended up basically working, very interested in China human rights issues. I mentioned earlier that I had gone to Auschwitz to set up this press conference about the murder for organs industry in China. So I had actually, our honeymoon, I'll just make a little comment here. It's worth, because you were asking about how we got to know each other. Our honeymoon was actually a trip which involved going to the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva, right, and advocating for basically against human rights atrocities in China. and frankly, actually also being kind of appalled at the reality of that structure because it wasn't being very effective. So we ended up going and doing that work directly. That's a whole other story. What was the other part of the question?
Times.
Oh yeah, so when we ended up going to work directly in Thailand of all places, it's also an interesting story how we got there. Cindy actually speaks Thai, okay, from work that she had done before. So I was working out in the countryside.
Hold on one second. That is a fun fact that we did not know about you. Wow, Kacey, you better get ready because we want a fun fact about you before we end this. So get ready. Go ahead.
Well,
sorry.
So I was working in the countryside. Okay, Cindy was working in Bangkok in the city. And what Cindy discovered, and this was kind of unrelated. This was like making ends meet. Cindy discovered that there was this whole kind of active underground railroad that was bringing sort of Chinese from out of China through the Golden Triangle, through Vietnam and Cambodia and so forth into Thailand, where they could then get UN refugee status and basically get out to these other countries. Like, for example, we resettled some in Norway, in Canada, in the US, and different places. And so, these people had amazing stories and incredible, amazing stories, right? And at this time, see, there was just a lot of, I guess, frankly, false information about the realities of China. It was something called the Kissinger Doctrine. You have to get into China. You have to basically, whatever you do, you got to get in there, otherwise your competitor will get in there. It's almost a democracy there. I remember Thomas Friedman wrote this column in 2009 about that, which made my face turn red because I was like, they're killing people for organs over there. What are you talking about, man? And anyway, I wanted to share these people's stories because they were, whoever it is that's out there, I'd be happy to send you one of these early stories, but basically amazing stories of perseverance, much like Manny's, right? But no one wanted to publish these things because the only thing you could say was, oh, it's becoming a democracy. It's so wonderful over there, right? And it wasn't. And so Epoch Times, comes along and no, Epoch, we want everything you've got. Epoch Times was founded by Chinese Americans to tell the truth about China 20 years ago, right? So they were ready for all that stuff. Yeah,
that's a great connection between Manny's story and what you do. So thank you, Kacey. Megan has a question for you, and Megan's question is, what advice would you give to aspiring documentary filmmakers?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, I think you need to have, a lot of curiosity in the subject that you decide to cover. Whether it's events or people or what have you. I think that genuine deep down curiosity is very important because making a documentary is not necessarily a easy straight line. There's no like one particular model to kind of follow to get you to the finish line. It's a lot of hard work. Just to film the thing, then to edit the thing as a whole other experience and journey in and of itself. So if you have a genuine interest in what it is that you're covering, I think that will guide you through the long, arduous journey. But I hope I'm not trying to scare you away from it. It's a really rewarding thing to do. From this documentary, I've been changed personally. Just having a chance to meet someone like Manny and to spend a few years with him and his family. His sort of the sort of wisdom and experience that he has, his attitude, his optimistic attitude in the face of all that he experienced, definitely sort of enriched my life. So it's both a challenging endeavor to undertake, but it's also equally an enriching experience to make a documentary.
Thank you so much, Kacey. Cindy, there was a question from Ray who asked about when did you really know the details of your dad's survival, and were there any cases of him telling you about any near-death situation?
Yeah, I mean, we knew the full story basically once the book existed, like reading the book or an early manuscript of the book. It's so hard to remember what I knew before near death. I think I knew the story of how it's hard to remember now, but I feel like I knew the story of how he made a decision. I can't remember if this is actually in the film or not, but when they were captured in Łódź and they were being put, so what had happened was, not in Łódź, sorry, in Staszów, like where they ended up in that, in the hole in the ground, in that, abandoned basement. So what had happened was that was a ghetto, and the Nazis had come and rounded up, everyone. And then there was kind of another round after that of anyone that was in hiding. And actually the Poles that were hiding them ended up giving them up, saying, come out, we'll help you go into the forest. You need to go into the forest. Took them up to the attic of the Polish family's place, and then the SS came and took them away. And they were put on these trucks in the courtyard, and his father and other people were put on one truck, and because he was a kid, they wanted to go on another truck or somewhere else, and he just had this instinct that he needed to jump on with them. And I think I remember knowing that story before, that there was like, just kind of a split second decision to, which probably saved him, because they were taken to a work camp, not a death camp. Yeah, and I remember here another story, well, actually more about his mother. I remember knowing the story that his mother, when she survived, I think was 9 months in Auschwitz, which is, I think 6 months was the average lifespan, so quite unheard of. And she had the story of how she had been saving up, bits of her daily allotment of, crappy bread to trade someone for a sweater. And she was saving the bread, under her, in her bunk, whatever. And just when she had enough for the sweater, someone had stolen it. So she was down the bread and the sweater, and it was winter. And I remember knowing that story for some reason. That was, that I know beforehand.
Wonderful. I want to tell you that someone wrote and said the following words: I feel so blessed by learning about Manny's life experiences, and thank you for sharing his story with the world. And I believe, Cindy, as we're about to end this, I believe that's sort of a universal reaction. I would imagine that when you show these at film festivals, and I'm sorry that over these past few years they've been online film festivals, because I would imagine for you and for Jan and for Kacey, the opportunity to be at a film screening, and then after to be in an audience with that Q&A. And I would imagine people coming up to you and sharing these same sentiments that people are sharing online in the Q&A. And it's something very special, and you should all be really proud of what you've done. And the fact that, I love what you said before, the fact that you did it. You didn't wait. It wasn't too late, because unfortunately we see what's happening. And I have to tell you, as the person that was given this privilege of interviewing you today, it's a very personal story for me, because we share very similar experiences. My dad is a survivor of Auschwitz. My dad got to Toronto after the war. My dad found that his mother was alive after 4 years, where each thought the other one was dead. And so he also, it took many, many years for my dad to share his story. And we too, as kids, knew that my dad was different. My dad had a number on his arm that nobody else's father had a number on their arm. And so I just want to say, really, thank you. It's we have this incredible film festival here in Miami, the Jewish Film Festival, and Igor and his staff, and they do a great job. And the fact that they find filmmakers like you guys and stories like your dad's is so special. And the fact that they can bring it to Miami, to Dade County, to down here in South Florida, when you guys are up there in New York and Hartford and Toronto, wherever you're at, and to make that happen for us here, and to allow us to really hear about your dad's story and learn from it, because I think that's really special. And I think you convey that as well in the film. And so I want to, on behalf of Igor Sternberg, the director of our Miami Jewish Film Festival, and Douglas, who works with them, and our lay leaders, and everyone here in Miami, I want to say thank you to you, Kacey, to you, Cindy, to you, Jan, for bringing us this film and for spending an afternoon with us. And we look forward to meeting you. Maybe you'll come down to Miami. And if I come up to Toronto and you guys are there, we'll go to Tim Hortons and have a Tim Hortons coffee. How's that? Thank you all very much for being with us, everyone. You take care.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.